Okay, so we have already talked about what a lingua franca is. Just to wrap it up, the lingua franca is the language we use to communicate with other people who do not share the same L1 or the same mother tongue as or the same mother tongue we have, right? And coming from there, I would like to point at this part in which it has been said that the situation with English, or like the reality of English in the world, has reached very high levels of non-native language speakers, to the point in which the proportion is just as you can see in this picture. We have one native English speaker for every 4 non-native users of the language. So having this situation in which the non-native speakers are majority, some questions arise, right? And that's why I would like to read this quote from a book written by Tim Marr and Fiona English in 2019, and it says, "English is no longer the white man's language. Today, when a non-native speaks English, he hardly ever remembers it is a foreign language. The users of the English language today are viewed as makers of meaning rather than learners of the language." So this just leads to the question of who owns English, right? Because we have so many different ways to see the world. The language we speak gives so much perspective to the way we express the world that English has become very rich, because it has had like so many people interfering and so many people expressing things in a different way, that it leads to English being a world language. And to this other reflection by Tapas and Broadbeat that I like very much, it says, "Anyone who speaks it has the right to own it. The norms of use are multilingual norms, and the strategies to teach English are also multilingual in nature." This is a great reflection about how to learn English, how to teach English, and how to live English in the global setting. Because of this spread, English has taken so many forms and has had so much influence from other languages and from different cultures that it has just become a different language, worth the repetition of this word, because English as a lingua franca is so big that it does not apply only to non-native speakers. If you reflect in how you use your English, for example, you will notice that you don't use the same words, or you don't express yourself the same when you're speaking with natives that share your L1 than when you speak with natives, like native speakers, or when you speak to others who do not share the same language as you do. So we need to keep certain rules, and that is why the traditional English teaching has been so questioned, because almost every textbook we have the natives as a model, right? We have the question a lot of, oh, but which English do you teach? Do you teach American English? Do you teach British English? And these textbooks are focused on one culture or the other, yeah? But Vivian Cook made this question, which is very interesting to me. It says, why to use a native-like model when they are a minority among English users? Number one. And number two, by English and Mar again, who speaks standard English? What is standard English, really? When English among native speakers has so many varieties, and these varieties have different prestige. So which exactly are we teaching? And when people ask me what English I speak, I always answer I speak Colombian English, because it is very, very influenced by my Spanish and by the way I see the world, and I see the world as a Colombian person. So the way language has evolved in Colombia, the way English has evolved in Colombia is very different to the way it has evolved in native English-speaking countries or in other countries which use English as a second language. We all are aware, I hope, of the Vitruvian approach, right? In which we have the center of the countries who speak English in a native way, but then we have an expanding circle. We have a second circle, which is the one that uses English as a second language. In here, we include countries like Nigeria or Pakistan, which are countries that have education in English. So people speak one language at home, but then when they go to school, they get their education in school. And then we have the third circle, which is the expanding circle. And there we have all the countries that consider English as a foreign language, which is the case of Colombia, for example, where we have to learn English, but we study English just as English. We don't use English as a way of instruction. So in these are the countries in which we have the most, like the highest confusion, I would say, into which English to teach. And among Vivian Cook's observation, there is one that I follow, and it is like, why to take native English speakers as the only model when we have so many people who have been successful in using English as a second language? Why don't we expose our students to many different accents and many different Englishes? Why don't we show our students other Colombian people who are successful at using English, other Japanese people who have been successful at using English? Why don't we let them use their listening skill to approach to different accents and to approach to different cultures, to different ways to speak English? And this took me to the University of Southern Indiana and the intensive English program. In here, we have, as you can see in the picture, we have a a multicultural environment. We have here people who are native English teachers. We have a very big Arabic community, and we have Latino community. We have people from Venezuela, we have people from Mexico, we have a lot of people from Panama. We have other Japanese people. This is the reality that they experience here. And this is and we have a European minority, but we still have European people there. So this is the group that I am going to present. This is the group that I studied. And because this is a rich community, a culturally rich community, a very multicultural environment. So I just realized that they use English as a lingua franca every day. And they also have this other phenomenon, let's say, and it is that because they have people who share their L1, they use it, they switch code, so the English they use among them is very different to the English they use when they communicate with others who are also non-native English speakers but from a different language. So the way that Panamanians speak with Venezuelans using English is very different to the English they use once they communicate with Arabic people or with American people. So from here, the research question is, how do English learners, instructors, and the director of the intensive English program perceive the use of English as a lingua franca, and how do they experience this reality inside and outside the English classroom? And before I get to show you the findings, I'm sorry, I don't know where to locate myself. I'm going to be just here. I would like for you to have other 5 minutes and go back to the Padlet. And in the Padlet, we have, what can you observe are the differences of lingua franca English teaching in an English-speaking country and a country where other language is spoken. I already explained to you what the intensive English program is. So based on this, just try to let me know how do you think it is different to have these classrooms and to teach there in comparison to teaching in Colombia, where all of our students come from a Spanish-speaking background. Let's have a thought on it, and I will see you in the next part of this lecture in about 5 minutes. Meanwhile, we're going to communicate through the Padlet. So I will see you there.